Today, on Catching Up with UDC Law Alumni, we're talking to Jonathan Smith, class of 1984, about winning the Gerald Scout Prize from the DC Bar and his work with Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Urban Affairs. So hi, Jonathan. Thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you for having this conversation.
Absolutely. We're really happy to have you with us. So let's jump right in. Tell us about yourself.
Well, I've always find this to be the most awkward of questions to try to describe yourself. Everybody knows you better than you know yourself very often. But I'm a lifelong civil rights, anti-poverty lawyer that started when I was in Antioch School of Law many years ago, and have been able to maintain a career doing this really work that has been just so gratifying to be able to do.
So why, out of all the law schools in the United States when you were looking, why did you settle on this one, on UDC Law?
I grew up in Maine and was very active in political work when I was in high school and in college, and knew that I wanted to, had the opportunity to go to law school, the privilege of being able to go to law school, but wanted to do that work to create more justice and to the ability and the opportunity to really be able to make a difference, to take that privilege and turn it back to make the world more fair. I had always thought that I would come to Washington. I only applied to Antioch because I was very excited about the very both the reality that Antioch focused on anti-poverty work and really at the intersection of race and poverty, and always thought that I was going to return back to Maine and work on a series of, I had done a lot of labor organizing when I was in college, and I thought I would go return, and then ended up getting a job here and staying for the next now almost 40 years.
Wow, that's a good long time. It's a testament to how exciting Washington, D.C. is, right?
Yes.
So how do you feel attending UDC Law, or Antioch, prepared you for the career that you have now?
Back when I started Antioch, there was a deep integration into understanding that what the role that law played in social change and the impact that law had on both the creation of inequality and the opportunity to address and reduce that inequality. When I started, we actually spent had to lived with clients for the first 3 weeks of our law school career as a way to get integrated into that community, to understand the experience of our client communities, and to really see that the incredible leadership that our clients would provide, that lawyering was a process not of supplanting the lawyer's judgments and the lawyer's interests for the clients, but one of actually lifting up the client's voice. And that has been the sort of the hallmark of one of the things that learned in that education, was the power in community, and the way that lawyers can either enhance that power or deprive communities of that power has always been a real touchstone going forward. And so I really credit Antioch for, in very early in one's legal career, imprinting the idea that at the center of all of this is the community's power and the role that lawyers play in enhancing that.
You recently won the Gerald Scout Prize from the DC Bar. So let's talk about that for a minute. In a long storied career that you have, how do you situate this honor, and what's the impact of winning the Scout Prize for you?
It is a tremendous honor. I'm very grateful to the Bar Foundation and to the Scout Committee for this award. The Scout Prize comes from your colleagues and from the members of the community in which you work, and in that way, it is really one of the most important honors that one can receive. I feel a little awkward at receiving it in this community of incredibly rich and talented advocates who labor every day to create more justice and to fight against inequity and inequality. And so it's very humbling to be able to receive this honor. It's also awkward to receive it as when one becomes a leader of an organization, you always get more credit than you deserve. And there's so many people who labor in the trenches every day. Of all of the recognitions, this one is particularly meaningful because it comes from your colleagues in this community.
Let's go back in time again. think back to those days when you were relatively new to Washington and you were here at the law school. What is one memory that, from law school that stays with you to this day? And why is that one of the things that just sticks in your mind?
Clinic was really the part of the legal education process that had the greatest impact. I mean, obviously, one spent a lot of time in the classroom learning the doctrine. One even, learned in some of the procedural courses and the practical courses, lots of important things. But clinic was really what made an impression. We back then, it was 3 semester-long clinics for the purpose of graduation. And I spent a semester in the housing clinic and spent literally a semester practically every day down in the landlord and tenant branch of the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. Through a peculiarity of the way that the court operated, not everybody in the clinic was able to get their certification to practice. Only a few of us did, and so we had many more cases than others might. And so I spent a lot of time in the L&T branch, and there were a lot of clients that you knew you had an immediate impact on because you were able to save their tenancy. There's something that you could do that kept them in their housing, and the importance of being in the housing. But I remember one case that really I still think about this case. I had been in court that day with the faculty member who was supervising me, and we had completed whatever the matters that we had. And as we were walking out the door in the back of the courtroom with the door open, the judge called out and asked us to come back and appointed us to a matter that was happening that day. It was a person who was being evicted from a small business that was being evicted in the Adams Morgan neighborhood. It was a little convenience store, and the man wasn't able to pay his rent, and there was very complicated circumstances. But the eviction was scheduled for that day, and the judge wanted someone to step in and to assist him, and we did. We stood in the hall and we interviewed him. We collected whatever information we could, and we went back and we had an evidentiary proceeding that morning, and we lost. It was and what had the biggest impact on me was walking home that day, and he lived between the law school and his store was between the law school and where I lived. So I literally walked by his eviction that night and spent some time standing with him with his things on the sidewalk and sort of figuring out what he was going to do next and being with him. And the impact that had was that it was the importance of us to recognize the limits of the law, that if we're going to create justice, we have to do what we do as lawyers, but there's so much more that we need to do. And that, it really was, it had just this impact of knowing how to approach the lawyering process, not through just seeing it as the lens of these are my legal claims and what I can accomplish, although one has to do that and one has to do that with tremendous skill, but knowing that the systems themselves had to change if we're going to achieve real justice. And so that is one of those things I think about frequently when I think about, how does one even approach the smallest of cases, and how do you use even the smallest of cases to build power in the people that are affected and to change the systems so that we reduce that inequality and that injustice.
What a powerful story. The fact you walked right by and got to spend some time with him, that I can see why that sticks with you to this day. It's also interesting that you used a case that you didn't win. So I'd like you to tease that out. I know you did there a little bit more about the power of hanging on to the victories and the losses.
You win more than you lose. And that's one of the things to really, one thing I want students really to know is that, when you look at the law, it is stacked against you. Often the facts are stacked against you. So the economics are stacked against you. Our clients, don't have the resources that the people that are challenging have, but really good lawyering, you can win those hard cases and make a real difference. And you win far more than you lose. The ones you lose probably stick with you more to some degree, because, you always question what you could have done differently, or, the impact that that's had on somebody. But those tendencies that, in clinic that we were able to save, the people, every family that was able to not be evicted, that didn't have to leave their home and had some stability, that made an enormous difference on their lives, even though our laws are, we have the most progressive laws maybe for tenants in the United States, and we still have, a epidemic of eviction that affects Black women and their families. And we can stop a lot of that by the lawyering that we do. And it just makes a huge difference. And so that is a message I wanted you to just give me. Good lawyering really matters. And it really affects people's lives. And there's nothing that is better than being able to solve someone's problem, whatever that might be, that would unsettle their lives and have this enormous cascading effect if you didn't solve that problem for them.
I realize this might be a bit redundant after that fantastic answer, but let's talk about what advice you might give to a law student who they're at the end of the law school journey and they're getting ready to graduate and launch that legal career. What is the thing you would tell them as they walked out the door? I
came to law school thinking that I was going to be go back and do union side labor work in Maine. That's what I thought I was going to do. And after my first semester, Herb Semmel, who was a professor at the law school, approached me and says, "What are you doing this summer for work?" I said, "I haven't figured it out yet." And he says, "I have a friend who's just started his private practice, to start a solo practice in Alexandria. He needs a law clerk. I think you should go work for him." And I spent that first summer in the Alexandria City Jail interviewing people that were confined there about the conditions of their confinement. And we ended up bringing a lawsuit that closed that jail. But that jail had been built originally during the colonial period as a debtor's prison. I mean, a debtor's prison in the traditional sense. You couldn't pay your debts. You went there and you were engaged in labor to pay off your debts. It was ultimately converted to, in the early part of the 20th century, into a prison, to a jail. It was the local jail until the 1980s when we got it closed. And that completely changed my view of what the opportunity of to be a lawyer might be. The work that I had wanted to do was originally remained just as vital, but this other work that I had not even understood before I had that opportunity became what has now been the core of my career. I spent more time working on prison and jail and other criminal legal system reform issues than anything else I've done in my career. And that came from being open to a new opportunity that led to the work that I did with helping create the DC Prisons Legal Services Project. And when I was at the Department of Justice, having spent time working on reforming police departments and prisons and jails across the country. And all that started with a faculty member giving me an opportunity that I didn't even know was an opportunity that I wanted to take advantage of.
As you know, we are celebrating 50 years this year. So we're playing a game called 5 in 50, sort of in celebration of you and in celebration of the 50 years we have been providing the legal services we have to the community. These questions have nothing to do with the law, nothing. Okay. So do not think about them any more than just, to give the first thing that comes to mind. And we're going to put 50 seconds on the clock. Okay. First one, cats, dogs, other, or none?
Cats.
Okay. Favorite genre of movie?
Mystery.
Invisibility or super speed?
Invisibility.
If you could trade places with anyone, living or dead, for a whole day, who would it be?
Someone living.
Fair.
Joe Biden.
Great. That might be the best answer to that ever. Are you a good singer?
No.
Me neither. So there we are. We did it in the 50 seconds. Thank you so much for that. It's been a real honor to talk to you. Sure. I know that we have worked with you since you've graduated in several different capacities, and yes, we always thank you for being a part of the community and for providing opportunities to our students and to our faculty and staff.
We have a bunch of alumni here at the committee, so we're very excited.